here we are living in a global pandemic. Here we are living in this, and what do you think of these discussions around these ethical issues, which are as simple as, do we, allow ourselves to be part of a trace system that can help at least curb some of the aspects of this pandemic?
Sort of the European take. In Europe, they're even more concerned with privacy issues than it's the case in the US, because here basically the possibility of collecting digital data is undermined on a legal basis. It's not properly possible for any government or any other institution to collect as many digital data as necessary for doing something against the pandemic, or for doing something in favor for increasing our health span. So I think the European solution is not even in the European interest. In the US, there's at least the possibility of the big companies of collecting the data, or the government. And then obviously we've got a third take on these issues, which is represented by China, because in China it's basically the political solution. Here we've got the government forcing everyone to give up the digital data, and they in that way have the possibility of collecting as much data as possible. And so far, actually, this is quite efficient. It works pretty well. And so I think...
Can I interrupt you just there? Because, yeah. I mean, it's odd to me in some ways. The most efficient system is the least free system, is a system where one is forced to give this up, for the state. And look, to me, in some ways, from a pragmatic perspective, that's great. Like, again, but there is also, one has to have a trust in the systems or in the institution that one is giving one's data. It's me, I'm giving me, to these people, or at least parts of me. And so one has to trust that's going to be used in a way that's not just beneficent to the state. I don't know, is beneficent the right word? Helpful to the state, exactly. but also helpful to me as the individual. It's that, I mean, that's really, to me, if we had to sort of take it to its core, it's how do we balance helping society as a whole and retaining my own individual freedom. I mean, that's really what it boils down to.
This is really spot on, the analysis. And, but we have to also recognize that at the same time, the US-American way of dealing with that issue is not in the interest of the users either. It's in the interest of the big companies, because in the end, they are making the money with the digital data they are collecting. So we've got the US solution where the companies are getting richer, and we've got the Chinese solution where it's basically the government who's having the benefits out of the collecting of the data. We need to find sort of a democratic way of dealing with the digital data. We have to make sure that it's in our interest, it's in the interest of the people, that we have the benefits of the data collection. This sort of depends upon the political arrangement, but I think we radically need to rethink a lot of our prejudices. And I particularly want to focus on something you've said, well, once we give up our privacy, we lose our freedom.
No, I didn't say that. I don't think I said that. I think people believe that. Okay, I don't think I said that.
At least you hinted at sort of.
Well, I think that's. I agree. I think that is the feeling. I don't necessarily think that's true, but it's only not true if whoever we're giving is, in your analogy, China, America, is there an intermediate balance where it's not being put in the hands of the state that doesn't really care about the individual but cares about the state, or the companies that only care about the bottom line? We need something else that somehow skirts both of those things, right?
Exactly. And I want to show, there doesn't have to be a conflict between freedom and the loss of privacy, because it depends on the political organization whether there's a conflict or not. If the digital data is used as in China, then there is a problem, because the people get sanctioned for what they're doing, for whatever they're doing, and the limitations and the rules are extremely rigid. And so what we have to do, there are two theories which have to do why we cherish privacy. So one of the theories is the sanction theory, and the other theory of privacy is the intellectual property theory. So if we want to make sure that digital data, which the government, and the government is the most likely, the most efficient institution which can collect all the data. If we can make sure that the intellectual property is not being taken away, but is being used as a way that we sell with our intellectual property. We buy something which is in our interest. So it's not the state taking away our intellectual property, but the money which is being made with that information is being used for something which is in our interest, like like a health insurance, like a general, like a public health insurance. Most people identify a longer health span with a better quality of life. So the money which is being made with that data is in the end used in favor of a public health insurance. Then it wouldn't be, the money wouldn't be taken away from us.
Well, this sounds wonderful. I mean, look, I love this idea. I mean, this idea of a global health insurance where you're giving your code, your privacy, all the things that are going on, whether that's with nano robots or whether that's with, you know, just a swab of, you know, one's DNA sequence, and then allowing the government to track us for the betterment of our own health. And that money would then, I mean, it's taxation. I mean, really, it's the social contract when one is taxed. I mean, we pay taxes with this idea that the government will, the police will be there, that we're educated, that the roads are clear, and so on and so forth. So in this case, we'd be paying some sort of a tax, or we'll call it a tax, some sort of a fee,
yeah.
and on the way out, we're getting health insurance that covers all of these things.
For that. That's
it sounds wonderful.
And so what we need to make sure, on the other hand, is sort of obviously if the data is the digital data needs to be stored somewhere. And whenever humans have access to the data, there's a risk of it being used against us for some kind of also illegitimate sanctions. So we need to protect the data, our data, in a safe manner. It only gets used in order to find out sort of correlations between genes and diseases, between all the information which are necessary for promoting our health spans, for political decision-making, for innovations. But it needs to be stored safely, and only in the case of emergencies, humans have access. Otherwise, it needs to be primarily processed by AIs. And this is the way to reduce that illegitimate use of these data that we humans get sort of bribed, that we humans get forced into ways of doing. Any kind of illegitimate use is reduced by the use of AI for processing the data. And at the same time, and the second step, just a second thought, which I think is essential, at the same time, we also need to guarantee, we need to open up and focus on freedom much further than we do. So that if we have access to the data, that we don't get sanctioned, you know, for something where no harm is directly done to another person. So plurality needs to be promoted much further than we have it at the moment. And that in this way, we don't have to fear the sanctions which go along with the collection of the digital data. So on the one hand, using the data to pay for something which is in our interest, paying for public health insurance. In the second way, we promote plurality much further so that we don't have to fear the sanctions. And in that way, the government, some kind of government can collect the data, but also needs to be stored properly.